This is the OTP presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans. When it's game day for your health coverage, trust Farm Bureau Health Plans to draw up a winning play for you. They've been backing Tennesseans for nearly 80 years. So glad to have Brian Callahan join us again this week. Coach, good to see you. Thanks as always for taking time with Amie and me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Coach, you mentioned in today's press conference that Will Levis was going to be week to week with the shoulder injury that he's been dealing with. At what point during your preparation for the Detroit Lions are you going to have to make a determination about whether Will Levis is going to be the quarterback or not?
Truthfully, probably by Wednesday or so, to make sure that Mason gets the reps. You know, that's always a challenge, and that's where I think, made this week a little bit harder on Mason too, is that he didn't get all of the reps over the course of the week to be able to go play. And so I'd like to, I'm not saying I'll be able to, but I'd like to be able to at least give him as much of the prep work if he's going to play to play. And Will on the flip side, him to get all the work too if he would play. So it's something that, it's not like it's it's not new. It's not like it's a new thing for Will. Like if he's going to be out, then we're just going to keep him out and let Mason take the reps and get ready to go play a game in Detroit.
Mason Rudolph moved the offense, particularly in the first half. If you do figure out midweek that he is going to be the guy against Detroit, are you able to give him more of the offense than what he was able to have in Buffalo?
He had quite a bit of the game plan was pretty well open. But it's just the live reps and the communication of some things. There's just a benefit to at least doing those things. Obviously, before going to play is always helpful. But yeah, there's also some things that may fit him, different style that may fit him differently than maybe it would fit Will. But for the most part, he's got pretty well open book on what we had up for the game.
For those things sort of meshing together, he and Lloyd Cushenberry did have some exchange issues there. Was that a function of the two of them not having worked together a good deal, or was it the noise more so?
Probably the first one. I think it's just the time on task together, and we got to do a better job of making sure that Mason gets enough of those snaps over the course of the week, whether he's the starter or not. We always have a center quarterback exchange in the pre-practice, and just got to make sure that he still takes those reps with Lloyd. So we can't have those problems at the end of the day. That was a earned 1st and 10 that we had, and we were starting to get back on track after they had just scored. I think it was a 10-7. We're about midfield, and we fumble a snap, which is killer. Those are ways that we're currently beating ourselves right now.
But just little things that when you don't get that work, especially as much time as quarterbacks in their life spend in the shotgun today, starting in high school, those rhythmic things, timing, cadence with the line, all of those things are just little parts that can hurt.
Yeah, that's and those are the difference between winning and losing, unfortunately. And those little details, and it's part of what I talked to the team about today, is something as simple as if you're supposed to be outside leverage, stay outside leverage. If you're supposed to make sure we handle the snap, handle the snap. Let's not. It's hard enough to win in the NFL. Let's not lose the game, and let's not do things that put us in position to lose as opposed to win. And we're not doing the things long enough, well enough to win games. We're finding ways to lose them, unfortunately.
The tight ends played a major role in the offensive effort against the Bills. Was that by design?
There was some things to them early, certainly, but they also got involved. It became a much different style coverage game for them. They played a lot more. They mixed some man, but it was much more zone-based and single high zone-based. So there's just these pockets underneath that we were able to get the ball to those guys for quite a few receptions. And then some of the play action stuff, we had Josh twice kind of on our bootleg game where he comes free off the backside, and some things that worked nicely against that defense, I thought, and the tight ends, I think, stepped up in the pass game, certainly.
You made it clear that you were not pleased with how the team handled the environment in Buffalo. What are some of the ways that you're hoping to improve the way that the team handles the environment in Detroit?
Yeah, we had too many false starts, and one is too many. But we had a red zone false start, which generally speaking, when you jump off sides in the red zone, it usually probably puts you in most of the time takes away 4 points. Those are really critical penalties. We had an offsides or two in a legal formation, just not set fast enough. The motion went before, just things that on the road they have to be cleaner. And again, it's hard enough to gain yards, but when you're inflicting your own negativity through that process, and it puts you behind the sticks. You're 1st and 15 or 2nd and 12 or whatever it is. You're well behind where you want to be, and puts you at a disadvantage. And those are things that we can control, and we have to do a better job of controlling our controllables, which is getting off on a snap count, managing the noise, being on top of the silent cadence. All those things have to be a lot better.
Hey, Titans fans, with a Kroger Boost membership, you'll score big with double fuel points, free delivery, and lots more. Go to Kroger.com/boost for details. Kroger, official grocer of the Tennessee Titans. Tighten up.
Home is at the forefront of all that we do. It's why we're so committed to caring for the places and spaces in which we work and live. Ashley, the official furniture provider of the Tennessee Titans.
We continue with Titans head coach Brian Callahan.
Coach, let's talk about the right tackle position. Jalen Duncan started in Buffalo, then gets injured in the first series of the game. You've made it pretty clear that he will not be playing in Detroit. So what do you do at that position? Do you open that up to competition this week?
That's where we're headed right now. Between John Ajoku and Leroy. Again, we're not getting a level of play that's sustainable there. There's too much, too many hits on the quarterback, too many soft pockets, too many things that aren't at the level that they need to be. So I'm clear, like there's tackles lose pass rush reps. It happens. JC lost one. It was critical. It ended up being a sack fumble that we recovered, but it crushed a potential explosive play. Tackles get beat, but it's just the frequency and the intensity at which we get beat sometimes that we have to be better. And there's really no way around it. I can't sit here and sugarcoat that any other way. It's just we're not playing at a level that's good enough at that spot.
What would John Ajoku need to show you in practice in order to earn that opportunity?
Doing things right all the time, and then being able to show you can anchor some in pass pro, which are things that he's got to be able to show, and that he can fit the run fits up the right way and get in combination the right way and do all the things that we need that position to do with the tight ends and with the guards. So, opportunity will be there for him, and we'll see if we take advantage of it.
You have talked about the other 4 spots on the offensive line, and you've been happy with their improvement, not going crazy, but you've said, hey, they've made steady improvement. As you look at that group's overall improvement, is there any way for the 5 to take a step forward in the way that you want until the right tackle situation is settled?
I think as a unit, no. I mean, you're only going to be up front as good as your weakest player. And look, every offensive line has weaknesses. Even the best ones in the league have weaknesses. But you're only going to be as good as that, And if you don't have, if it's really weak, it's going to be hard because you can't really necessarily make up for that all the time. And we have to need better. But the guys that have played have done some good things. And again, they need to play better as well. But there's been improvement, there's been growth. Those are all things that we're looking for with a really young offensive line. There's been plenty of positive signs as well.
Let's look ahead to the Detroit Lions. Their offense has been doing some pretty incredible things. What has stood out to you when you watch them on tape?
They're they're really good. They're really good. They have a great toughness about them. They're a very physical team, both in all 3 phases. I think Ben Johnson's always been, a really smart, creative offensive play caller. They put guys in really good position, but I think at the end of the day, they pride themselves on just being more physical and tougher than you, and they show that. That's sort of been their MO. They still got that blue collar mentality. I think Dan Campbell's done a fantastic job building that program from the time he took over, and they certainly embody the toughness that he wants them to embody. And then they got really good players. I think the two running backs are fantastic. I think Laporta and Amon-Ra, and I mean those are, and then Jared Goff is playing a brand of football that's particularly efficient, and they've found ways to win a lot of football games, and they're an NFC Super Bowl contender for a reason.
And the stat that really jumps out is they have more touchdowns in the last 4 weeks than incompletions, which is strange. I mean, it's never happened before in a 4-week period in the NFL, and yet they're still really built first and foremost to run the ball. They build everything off the run to start with, right?
Yes, they certainly do, and they do a good job with their action game and their screen game that goes with it. But they're always going to be with that group of offensive linemen, a run first and try to hammer the ball, and they do a good job of it, and they're talented on top of it.
All right, so I want to talk about their defense. Aaron Glenn's the defensive coordinator. For so much talk about the offense, here's the defense that has 19 sacks and 11 takeaways. What's the challenge of playing against an Aaron Glenn defense?
The amount of pressure they apply, and I mean that in a lot of different ways. They apply pressure in the secondary with how they cover. They're going to play man coverage. They're going to challenge you. They have plenty of pressure packages. Their scheme is smart. It's sound. And then they get after the quarterback. And what you see when you get after the quarterback is sacks and turnovers. And those are the things that put their team in great position to capitalize on. And, every year you look at the teams that make the playoffs, and most of the time they're usually plus 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 or more in the turnover margin, and that's how you get there. But they do a great job. They got good players. They got good scheme, and they'll be a real test. It's a tough defense to play against.
It was their first game without him, but did you notice the defense doing anything differently with Aiden Hutchinson out?
Nothing at this point where I haven't watched all of it to know everything post and pre, just what it looks like. I haven't gotten that far, but certainly that's a huge loss for them, and they have to find a way to make up for it because his performance has been stellar up to this point, and certainly that's a loss for them. That hurts that they don't have that particular style of play. I mean, he's a go get it, go win one-on-one, sack a quarterback whenever you want, and he's really good, and that's what you get from a premium pick that they picked him at, and they feel that loss certainly, and they're going to have to find ways to manufacture some of that lost pressure on the quarterback.
A lot of good players on the defense, but the two safeties, Branch and Joseph, 4 interceptions each, make a lot of plays. What's the challenge going against the defense with 2 safeties that are ball hawks that way?
There's not much space. They know how to close space. They know how to close passing lanes. There's a lot of anticipation that they do because they're really smart players, and that's why they have the interceptions they have. Is that they're able to anticipate and make plays on the ball almost as a quarterback anticipates and makes throws to open areas. They know how to close that space, and they're just around the ball a lot, and which means they're smart football players. They know where to be, but Branch in particular, those guys have really been impressive.
Now, you coached in Detroit, so you understand what their recent success means to that fan base, that region.
Yep.
Coupling that with the fact that Ford Field has a roof, and so it just gets loud.
It does.
Is that one of the harder places to play just from a home field advantage standpoint?
I would say so, absolutely. It's a passionate fan base. It's a great fan base and their recent success is made them more rabid than they kind of already were. Even when I was there, we were a fringe playoff team. We went to the playoffs one year and won 8 or 9 games. We were a competitive football team, and even those games were loud. It's a cool stadium. It's a great city. It's a place that I really enjoyed living on top of it. But it's an environment that Minnesota. Those teams in those indoor stadiums that have very passionate fan bases, it is incredibly loud, and the noise seems to just echo inside of it. Now, thankfully, we played in a pretty raucous environment yesterday, so we should be prepared for that.
And you can take some of what you learned in that situation and apply it pretty effectively, I would think.
Yeah, there's things that we have to do better, and I think we'll address those over the course of the week. And again, it's just you get to go do it again. You get a chance to go prove yourself again, and that's what makes the NFL great is we get a chance to go on the road and see if we fixed our problems. And I think we'll be able to, but we're going to have to if we want to play well in that environment because it is a challenging place to go play.
Thank you so much for the time.
You got it.
Brian Callahan with us. Next up on the OTP, a visit from Cynthia Frelund from the NFL Network. Here's that. Cynthia Frelund from NFL Network. She is C. Frelund on X. I'll spell that. CFRELUND on X. Part of NFL Game Day, part of so many different things. There's actually a show on YouTube now, I understand. Numbers Game with Cynthia Frelund on YouTube. Is that still a thing?
Yeah, it's fun. It's a thing every week. I do like a Thursday night preview and then do all the rest of the games. So it's basically a quick walkthrough in under 30 minutes. You get a couple of stats on each team that's playing. If they're on a bye, we let it go. And then a reason for why the score prediction that I have came out that way, right? So you can either choose to agree with me or disagree with me, which is fun. And then we play some games in between, like, people who have elevated odds to score touchdowns or, just fun things, historical stats that you can sit at the bar with your friends when you're watching games and be like, did you know? Blah, blah, blah. And it's fun.
That's our bread and butter. We love a did you know around
Did you know?
here. That's
Who
a big
doesn't
thing.
love did you know?
Yeah, it's just such a great thing. The thing about that show and a lot of what you do that's so interesting to me is that you take NFL stats, you take next gen stats, and now you also have your own models, correct, that you're running. Tell me a little bit about that and how in the world a person develops a predictive model.
Yeah. So the difference between kind of mine is I'm going to use the word I cheat, meaning I phone a friend. So I ask a bunch of actual coaches, front office executives, depending on the time of year, draft season, front office is more interesting, or trade season, front office is more interesting. But I go through and I ask them, what am I seeing here? Because, and the coach who actually called the play can be like, oh, the safety messed up or whatever. The wide receiver ran the wrong route. So you kind of get a sense of like, what are the actual principles of this team and what's kind of a mistake, if you will. So it's phone a friend with that. And then I have a graduate degree in predictive analytics. So I take it back to the actual like stats PhDs to be like, is my math correct here? Because, you move a decimal point the wrong way, you're going to get a really wrong answer. So I basically just have created a vetting system that helps me reflect more of the decision makers who are making it. And then it's checked by people who are smarter, than me, than I could ever be.
So having those relationships is a very interesting part of all of this because it's not just you sitting in a room without windows looking at a computer screen. There's so much context that you're able to provide because you have those relationships. How long did it take you to phone those friends, meet those people, develop those kind of lines of communication to be able to call and get that context?
I mean, considering I'm only 25, I've really done it like very quickly.
Yeah.
But it really started in 2008. When I was getting my MBA, I spent my summer internship at the league office in New York, and I worked with the competition committee there, met some Hall of Fame coaches, and really just asked a lot of questions and kept in touch with them since then. So it really started in 2008. So that quite some time ago when I was a mere baby. I just was a baby at that point.
It's really ugly how the internet tells people how old everyone
I
is.
know. Can we turn that off?
The internet's wrong. Do you know that? So the internet has my age wrong. It makes me 2 years older, but it also said that my dad is MacGyver, which makes that man more happy than any gift my sister or I could ever give him. So I will never correct it because he tells his golf buddies like, hey, do you know I'm MacGyver on the internet? Like, it's great.
Nice.
So
That's awesome.
There are good things that come, but it goes both ways. But
Well,
I get 2 more years, apparently.
Well played by you overall. Well played. All right, so in 2024, what is the most important metric that you have found, or maybe there's not one, I'll let you go forward on it, to an NFL team winning?
Well, it depends on how your team is actually made up, right? Like, I would imagine that, like you're going to get I'm going to give you a different answer if you ask me the Chiefs, who have actually a weird one this year in terms of, you see Patrick Mahomes not throwing the ball as deep as we're used to. You see much more yak. That is not typically a principle that we see from Patrick Mahomes. And the defense is driving a ton of wins for them. That's a different formula than, say, the Lions, who are relying on a really stout run game, a really stout passing off of those run principles. And then their defense without Aiden Hutchinson, just came to mind there, right, has had some significant differences, which drive a different formula for success. So the reality is the success you have reflects using the pieces of your team to the best of your advantage. That's the truth. Every year, it's never different. This year, there are some overall trends that are different, like teams who can accurately use 12 personnel, meaning 2 tight end sets. They've had more success, just overall, rule of thumb stuff. But and teams who don't allow yards after missed tackles, see the Saints defense, right? So those are this year some of the things we're now measuring that we can really attribute to success or not success.
But Cynthia Frelund, what you're really saying is you have to do what you do to a max efficiency rather than compare yourself to another team in terms of a statistic or a principle or whatever. The decision must be made. We are going to be this. We are going to be this on defense. We are going to be this on offense. And if we do that to max efficiency, that's our number one key to winning. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a little, I'll add one more level of that, because there are some things when you have matchups in specific games. Matchup makes fights, right? Like the style makes the fight, right? So on some level, you have to balance what I am really good at with what my other team is not so good at, to try to find those spaces where you have an edge. If you're going to put steel on steel every time, it's going to be harder sledding, right? Like tougher to deal with. But if I'm going to try to exploit, like, I'm a little better at the tight end, well, I don't know, making something up, right? That the tight end I have a better route running capability from my tight end, so I'm going to pass to them more in this game because they have a deficiency at the linebacker level. That's the type of place where, it's not just, I'm going to put my absolute best against your worst. It's finding these smaller adjusting spots where I have to adapt to what my, you can't get outside of your own who you are, but I have to adapt to my surroundings in order to find success.
We've been talking throughout the first, quarter and some change of the season. We're not to the halfway part yet, but throughout the first part of the season, we've been noticing, just kind of as viewers, that it seems like there's a lot more run. There's a lot less of the just throwing it all over the field like we've seen in previous years. Is this a trend that is backed up by numbers in any way? Is that a real thing that we're noticing, or is this just kind of an observation that it feels like?
I mean, it would always feel like, I feel like Tennessee would feel like that even more, but just in general, the reality is the pendulum swings back and forth. If you're going to pull all these linebackers off the ball to help protect against the pass, then of course the offensive minds in this game are going to say, let's run duo, baby, or your high school, run up the A gap, meaning right next to the center, because that's what the defense is giving them. So there's always this pendulum swinging back and forth about what's going to be more successful. And a lot of that has to do with, what you're seeing on these, again, I also think you're thinking it because a lot of the college level quarterbacks that are coming into our league now tend to be a little bit more run heavy. I'm not gonna say run first, but maybe Jaden Daniels is, but a lot more run heavy than we've seen from, there are rarely, pocket passing doesn't seem to be what works right now, right? So there's something about O-lines and O-line, this is I'm watching I've already started fast forwarding to the draft. This is gonna be a rough O-line year coming out of the draft. There's 2 or 3 that are maybe, so running really helps. When you have deficiencies in pass protection, running the football really helps get you in situations where your passing becomes far less volatile. So there's a lot of it. It's sometimes it's supply and demand, meaning do we have the supply of O-linemen? Do we have the supply of running backs, et cetera? And sometimes it's what is the defense giving us? Let's run because there's so much more space in the middle of the field.
What is the most important or most significant statistical trend that you're seeing so far in the 2024 season, Cynthia?
I think there's something about that. The teams who can, with the 12 and 13 personnel, we're seeing loading up with these, I will call them, sometimes they're it's disguising tight ends that are either pass catchers or extra offensive linemen. Because what we're seeing is differences in quarterback play have made it so that you now want to be able to, like, you always want to trick the defense, right? Your goal is to create the most space possible so I can either, they don't know if I'm running or they don't know if I'm passing, right? And a lot of the ways these heavier, being efficient with heavier formations, so heavier personnel sets, more like traditional kind of like ground and pound football dynamics, fullbacks and stuff have been more, we've seen a lot of advantages of being able to execute that right now. And I think that is speaking to a lot of how defenses have chosen to drop linebackers into coverage, et cetera. So I think this year, at least this far, that's what we've seen.
With the addition of the dynamic kickoff, there's been a lot of changes, and I would assume there's been a lot of statistical changes as well. What's something that you have noticed about the way that has impacted the game overall?
If I were telling a team what to do right now, I would kick it into the end zone every single frickin' time until I got into a high leverage situation later in the season, and then I would do something weird because they're not expecting it. But where the line yard you're at is it's now 5 yards different than it was before, where you're starting in the average starting field position. So until they make it more punitive to kick it into the end zone, you're not going to see that. It's just you are seeing fewer injuries, which is great. We love that. We don't want any injuries on, that was a highly injured part of the game, which is wonderful. And you're also seeing, like, I just don't think we've seen the true strategy of it yet. Like, we will see, there will be like some weird week 10, something weird's going to happen where a team that's maybe potentially playoff eligible. So look for these like historic coaches that have like special teams backgrounds. Like, look at the Harbaughs, look at, Sean Payton, guys who have like historically showed us things that are like, oh damn, that is, you got me good there in special teams specifically.
Interesting stuff. Cynthia Frelund from NFL Network talking numbers with us. I want you to make me understand Patrick Mahomes. Undefeated team. He has an 82 passer rating right now, 6 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Does not seem like a Patrick Mahomes-ish year statistically, and yet they're effective and they keep winning. Make me understand the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes' year to this point and how it all fits together from a numbers standpoint, Cynthia.
I don't know if we've seen the true identity of this team yet. I mean, I understand they're undefeated. They're the only undefeated team, so they're pretty darn good. But I don't know if we know exactly what it's going to look like yet. Because if you think about it, losing Rashee Rice, losing Isaiah Pacheco, gaining Kareem Hunt back, I don't know anything. I'm not breaking news, but I would imagine we see some sort of wide receiver acquisition in the next few days here before the trade deadline, just because they need to refresh it, like add more at the position. That has been extremely key. But, I think a part of this team, we talk about Chris Jones a lot, and for great reason, but I don't know if we talk about Trent McDuffie enough. I mean, 22, their cornerback, that kid is, he's really, obviously he was injured his first year, second year, great. Like, this is a defense that the structure of the defense is really reflecting what they need to do. That win yesterday, and I'm a big Patrick Mahomes fan. I feel very lucky that we get to be watching him in his prime, like super lucky. Like, our kids won't get it, like whatever, like this is cool. But that wasn't him winning the game yesterday. That was that defense creating so many problems for Brock Purdy that they just couldn't overcome it. So, I'm not taking anything away from Patrick Mahomes. And I'm also saying that defenses are now, they're never going to give him single high coverage. Why would you? You're just going to get burnt, So that's just more a function of, like, again, taking what the defense gives you, but also their defense is pretty darn good. So relying on that defense to help get you those wins.
Well, if we're talking about quarterbacks, we should also talk about Jared Goff,
because
the Titans are going to see him
This is crazy
in
what
a couple
he's
of
doing
days.
right now.
He has had 3 weeks in a row of a passer rating over 140 or more. It's bananas. Has something changed about him? Has something changed about the people around him? Like, what is happening to make him so unbelievably successful right now? 2
things. Number one, the O-line. I am from Michigan. Never in my life, like, I watched years of Matthew Stafford getting clobbered, and never in my life would I be like, this O-line is really in contention for being the best in the league. Like, top 3, like no lower than 3 in any way I can say it. And number 2, Ben Johnson's creating so many opportunities for the right play. Like Jared Goff's picking up what the defense is putting down, but they're working together. That run game being so efficient. It may not be the run game that you're sitting there being like how I close my eyes and think about like the Derrick Henry Titans, right? But it is a run game where you're like, okay, reliably, I don't care if it's David Montgomery or Jahmyr Gibbs or both of them, they're getting you 4, 5, 6 yards on first down. So now you're in second and manageable, and you're in third and manageable. Jared Goff was under so much pressure in previous seasons and throwing like, it's hard to have a play on 3rd and 16. It's just that, like, there are not a lot of things that work when that's the case. So, I think it's everything working together, and Jared also performing really well. It's all of those things in unison right at the right time.
And I mean, his numbers, though, overwhelmingly in terms of completion percentage, 76 of 91 in the last 4 games. That's 83.5%. The functionality of that is so important because you keep the clock running when you do that, so you help your defense. I mean, completed passes and completion percentage is really an underrated statistic. When we see somebody complete 68% of their passes, we say, oh, he's very accurate. We don't even factor in the incredible value it is to the entire football team by not only keeping the chains moving, but keeping the clock moving and using the pass game as an extension of the run game.
It's weird to say, like, it's a good thing they have such a good run game, because usually you think about a team that are scoring that many points, they're passing a ton. But the truth is it's both of the things working together. They've got the right pieces in place to really support each other. So and it's going to be, the Titans defense is a really underrated unit across the entire NFL, especially with L'Jarius Sneed playing. Like, you can't really pass on them. You certainly can't run against them. So there's a lot of things where that will be a really interesting test for the Lions. And again, we talk about matchups making fights. Like, that will be a very interesting, that side of the ball will be a really interesting matchup between the best part of the Lions and the best part of the Titans.
Cynthia, would you say, from your statistical background and your obvious football background, and from building the two pieces together, that right now the Detroit Lions might be the ultimate example of complementary football in a traditional sense and in a analytic sense?
Yes, I would. I can't, to be honest with you, I'm like a little like it's funny. I have to do all of my coding blind because I love, like, there's certain players you like, Maury, whatever. Like like I would pick a touchdown for DeAndre Hopkins in every single week because I just love him. But like, point being is, like, I have to do it all blind. And when you do see like the strength of the team and how, look, I still want to see if they're going to add to their pass rush, because without Aiden Hutchinson, the complementarity of everything does go down. I mean, this guy is good for 7-8 pressures per game. Like, that is a massive amount. Some people don't do that in 2 games. So I'm curious to see how that works out going forward against teams who, the Lions play a lot of man. You can get got there if you have a really strong ability to stop the pass rush of who's left, right? So the more dynamic you are rushing the passer, the more the man defense becomes effective. But those two things complement each other too. So I'm not willing to go 100% there yet, but I wouldn't if it was any team, not just the Lions. And all Lions fans are self-deprecating, so we don't believe good things are capable for us. So that aside.
You mentioned the injury to Aiden Hutchinson, the huge hole that it leaves. Does it make more sense to find a person, whether it be before the trade deadline, whatever it is, to fill that role, or to have other people within the defense? I know against the Minnesota Vikings, you saw a lot of activity from the linebackers. They were doing a lot of different things, making a lot of plays, when maybe that's a role they wouldn't have had to fill before. I guess the question is, do you want the one person to fill in for him, or do you want a fill in by committee?
The reality is it's what, I don't know. I have to look at what's out there in terms of like obviously more is better. So adding, even if it's not, you're never going to replace Aiden Hutchinson. Like, it's not worth going out to trade for Max Crosby, like that, that kind of thing, right? But it would be worth it to add to because a lot of times the subbing in factor, like how many snaps now are you increasing on every single other player? So, people do get tired, and it's a long season, and attrition was going to happen anyways, right? Other people are going to get hurt. That's the nature of this game. So I believe adding in general would make sense, but the strategy around adding also has to factor in with what the cap situation. I don't have access to that other than, what outsiders are given with these weird tweets from agents who are like, I got $1 billion. And you're like, but what? So you don't really know.
You're from Okemos, Michigan.
Uh-huh.
And
right next to East Lansing, right next to Michigan State.
Yeah, right there. You love the Detroit Lions.
I do.
You've admitted that when you got to stand next to Barry Sanders at the draft. For a second, I didn't think you were going to make it. I really didn't, I
made Barry cry.
I know. It was a beautiful moment. But taking off that hat for just a second, is this the best team in the NFC as we speak in October?
It's really hard for me to say that. I don't know what's going on with the Eagles. I don't know what's going on with Jaden Daniels being potentially hurt. I can't even believe I'm putting that up in this echelon. The San Francisco 49ers, if Christian McCaffrey comes back, but it is certainly up there. Like there's no team in the South. I'm being very candid. There's no team in the South I think could beat them. I know that the Bucs actually did beat them head to head, but you do that a couple of times. We got throughout the course of the season. I think that defense is gonna drop one, right? So I think it's up there, but I really think this division overall is really tough. I'm curious to see how the rest of the division games play out. The Packers will be an interesting matchup. That defense is a weird fight for them as well. Same with that offense. So they're up there, but I think the whole NFC North, I've never said this before in my life. I think the whole NFC North could really is a really good division. And it kind of sucks for the Lions because they've always been in this bad division, but they've also been bad. But now the whole division is good. Can we trade them to the South for this year? Okay, great.
Cynthia Frelund, thank you so much for taking the time with us. We always feel a little bit smarter after we end these conversations.
I love seeing you guys. I'll see you probably in New Orleans? Hopefully before that, though.
Hey, Titans fans, SeatGeek makes it easy to find tickets so you can be a part of all the touchdown celebrations this season.
Whether you're buying or selling football tickets, SeatGeek is the place to do it. SeatGeek is the official primary ticketing partner of the Tennessee Titans.
The most disruptive idea in ticketing, a ticket that works. Expect the expected.
SeatGeek.
SeatGeek. Made a rookie mistake this football season? Maybe you should have had a Snickers.
Because now you can enter for the chance to turn those rookie mistakes into prizes, including a trip to Super Bowl 59.
Visit snickers.com/rookie mistakes for details.
Hope you enjoyed Cynthia Frelund with us on the OTP. For Brian Callahan and Amie Wells, I'm Mike Keith. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.